Welcome back, Epic 7 players, to another How to Play video, and in this one we're going to be talking about one of the most tragic characters in the game's story, Politis. If you've never seen any of these videos before, what I try to do is go super in depth and cover everything you could possibly want to know about the character, including their stats, their skills, some endgame equipment builds for you to try out and experiment with, as well as some pointers on how to use them in World Arena. So, with the introduction out of the way, let's move on to Politis' stats. Politis is a fire mage of the Gemini zodiac symbol, which should look familiar to you because it is the same stat line as Spectre Tenebria, as well as characters such as Araminta, Silverblade Araminta, and Ball and Cezanne. It is one of the most, if not the most common stat line for a 5-star mage. She has 1,197 attack, 4,572 health, 106 speed, 683 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, 30% effectiveness, and no effect resistance. This translates to good attack, very high defense, and amazing starting effectiveness for a mage. However, she has just okay speed and absolutely abysmal health compared to the other 5 stars in Epic 7. As a bit of trivia before moving on to Politis' skills, in the English dub of Epic 7, Politis is voiced by Reba Burr, whose voice you can hear in characters such as Aoi Kanzaki from Demon Slayer, Len from Sword Art Online Gun Gale Online, and Kaguya from my personal favorite anime from 2018, Violet Evergarden. In the Japanese dub of Epic 7, however, Politis is voiced by Ogura Yue, who you can hear in characters such as Priestess from Goblin Slayer, Passion Lip from the Fate franchise, and Nase from Platinum End, which is currently airing this season, and I highly recommend. The S1 of Politis is Call of the Stars. It has a 1x attack multiplier and a 25 to 40% chance to stun depending on Molagora. Average attack multiplier, average stun chance for an S1. Not much else to say really about this move. Stun's a pretty strong debuff though. The signature skill of Politis is her S2, Astral Glide. It is a passive skill that gives, as long as the enemy isn't a boss or elite monster, it decreases enemy combat readiness gained by 50%. Additionally, when the enemy uses a non-attack skill, Politis will counter with Tranquility. Tranquility is an AoE attack with a 1x attack multiplier. It decreases enemy buff durations by 1 turn and increases Politis' combat readiness by 30%. Tranquility can only trigger once every 2 turns. This is what makes Politis, Politis. It is, again, her signature skill. If the enemy is picking a lot of non-attack skill characters, Politis was designed to punish them by removing their potential buffs and doing potentially quite a bit of damage to them, as well as allowing her to take the turn. She was originally designed as an answer to auxiliary lots and flans, specifically cleave teams. However, in recent times, you usually see her countering specific Soul Weavers, as well as one mage in particular, and we'll talk more about that in a second when we get to the Soul Burn. Astral Glide, however, remains one of the very best passives I feel like in the game. It is very powerful and very flexible. The move Tranquility has a respectable attack multiplier, and it is on a mage with a very good attack score. This allows Politis to be a very punishing damage dealer versus some specific compositions. However, since the move also removes debuffs, you can play her as more of a control character or a support-oriented character if you so choose, and that is what we will talk about more when we get to the equipment section. The S3 of Politis is Starfall. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Malagoras. It is a 1x attack multiplier that hits all enemies. It has a 75 to 100% chance to blind and leave the enemy team unbuffable for 2 turns. Unbuffable, in my opinion, is one of the most backbreaking debuffs in the entire game. Attack buff, barriers, defense buffs, these are the things that win games. And if you can have them and your opponent cannot have them, it is a massive, massive boon to you, and you're most likely going to win the game. Decreased hit chance isn't the best debuff, however it does reduce incoming damage, and it is especially potent in the current metagame because there are a lot of red, green, and blue units running around. They already naturally have a 50% chance to miss. If you hit them with blind on top of that, they absolutely cannot hit your characters, and they will take quite a bit of reduced damage, and also they won't really take any debuffs on them. So yeah, really good S3 in my opinion, and it has a really, really nice animation as well. Now let's talk about the Soul Burn of Politis, which is an extra turn on her S1 at the cost of 20 souls. It's not quite as broken as Landy or Spectre Tenebria's because it doesn't hit multiple characters, and it doesn't have an insane attack multiplier, but it's still really strong nonetheless because, honestly, all extra turn Soul Burns are. In the past, the way this move was used was you would wait for your opponent to use a non-attack skill, boost up to the front thanks to the Tranquility 30% combat readiness boost, and then Soul Burn to potentially stun a target, and then take your second turn, which would reset the cooldown of Tranquility so that you could punish the enemy for using a non-attack skill later on in the fight. In recent times, however, Politis has become a niche counter to Angel of Light Angelica as long as you are holding to Hagel's Ancient Book and the enemy does not have Bellion on their team. So, for those of you who do not know, Angel of Light Angelica's S3 is a non-attack skill which will trigger Politis' S2 Tranquility. However, because the skill leaves your entire team silenced, there's not really much that Politis can do about it. And also, Tranquility gives the entire team enemy skill nullifier thanks to Angel of Light Angelica's S2 passive. However, if you are holding Book, you do have options because you will have a Soul Burn available. Angel of Light Angelica's silence only lasts for one turn. So if you Soul Burn your Politis, you can essentially snap out of the silence and then counter the enemy team with your S3 Starfall. It will remove the skill nullifiers that you just gave them and leave them with unbuffable and decreased hit chance, which can give you a fighting chance for many players who otherwise don't have an answer to Angel of Light Angelica. If you have a character like Maid Chloe, however, you have an even better option, as you could choose to not use the Soul Burn on Politis, and then when Maid's turn comes around, Soul Burn Maid for an extra turn, and then break out of the silence, and then use your S3 in order to cleanse your entire team, give them an attack buff, and re-raise, and turn the tide on this absolutely oppressive character. When it comes to Molagora priorities, you'd absolutely want to be maxing Astral Guide first. Trust me, I speak from experience. There is a huge difference in damage when this move is Molagora compared to when it's not. I know it's only a 30% damage increase, but you really feel it. More so than any other move I have played with in recent history. Having the damage on this move really does matter and decides quite a number of games, so I absolutely would recommend this one gets maxed first before you even look at the other two skills. After that, you probably want to be maxing Starfall because it has extra effect chance, and then also the decreased cooldown, and then finally look at investing into the S1 Call of Stars. For the minimum, or I should say the maximum, I think you'd want to invest for many players, it's probably +4 in the S1, max the S2, and +4 in the S3. Politis is a powerful mage whose entire niche is to stop enemies from using non-attack skills. Since non-attack skills are probably some of, if not the most powerful moves in the entire game, having a dedicated character with a dedicated passive to punish them makes her a must-build hero for anyone who seriously wishes to climb RTA or at least have a strong arena defense team. Many viewers in my comment section in the past have asked me to do a how to play on Politis because they simply do not know how to build her. And that's understandable, honestly, because even I am still learning things about the character. Politis is a very flexible hero that can do many different things based on her build as well as her artifact choice. Tranquility having a solid damage multiplier and most likely giving Politis the next turn allows you to punish enemies who use non-attack skills with a surprising amount of damage and allows her to function as a pseudo-cleave character. But what if you don't need damage? Well, then you can absolutely put an artifact like Abyssal Crown on her and punish non-attack skills with a potential team-wide stun. And if you just don't want your opponent to have any buffs, while your primary damage dealer hides behind a ton of your own buffs, you could play something like Violin. As I've said, there's a lot of flexibility in this hero, and I'll now go over the 3 types of builds that I've used, or at least seen have success at high-level play. The first Politis build to talk about is a damage dealing build. We are going to be on speed immunity, by the way, for all 3 builds. You definitely want to get used to that. Speed is something that Politis needs in order for her to take the turn on her S2 passive Astral Guide, so you definitely want her to be on speed set, I feel like, very often. You could make a case, I feel like, for counter set, but in my experience, I don't particularly think it is very good. I think that there are better options available to you. So for all of these, I will be on speed set, but if you wish to adapt most of the stat lines you see here to counter set, by all means, you are more than welcome to do so. When we take a look at the desired stats, we want 3,500 attack, 1,200 defense, 9,000 health, 200 speed, 100% critical hit chance, 280 critical hit damage, and her base score of 30% effectiveness. This gives us the highest damage stats, I feel like, in order for Politis to cleave or do a ton of damage to the enemy team, while having just a little tiny bit here of survivability with the 1,200 defense. In my personal preference, I do not really like this build, but this is the established build for Politis players that want to be very aggressive and punish the enemy for using non-attack skills with a very powerful attack. Taking a look at the right side gear, we are on a crit damage necklace, attack percentage ring, speed boots, and the artifact that I am choosing to use for all of my stat calculations is Tehagel's Ancient Book, and that is for the exact reasons that we talked about in the Soulburn section of this video under the skills section, because I want the ability to counter Angel of Light Angelica with this character. You are more than welcome to use things such as Abyssal Crown, a Yellow Violin, or even a damage-based artifact such as Portrait of the Saviors. Choose whichever artifact best suits your playstyle. Again, very flexible character, can do quite a number of things. So again, I leave it up to you. The largest takeaway should be from this entire section for the DPS, what the initial stat line is, that 3,500 plus attack, 280 plus crit damage with the 1,200 defense. That's the takeaway you should have for this DPS Politis. Looking at the average piece, we want 18% attack or more, 14% crit chance, because we're on, again, immunity set, not crit set here, because the character simply will just never take the first turn, so she's vulnerable to debuffs, 12% critical hit damage, and then for the rest of the stats, you either fill in with speed or some kind of bulk. The second build for Politis is a utility/control build. This is for players that simply just want to have a tanky Politis whose entire job is to either stun the enemy team or make sure that the enemy simply just does not have any debuffs. There's not really any damage to be had on this team, so if you are drafting a Politis like this, you need to make sure that you have a single powerful carry DPS, such as a Landy that can actually take care of the entire enemy team by herself. Again, primary sets, we are on speed immunity, although this build, more than the first one, I feel like is well suited to counter if you did want to go for it. I, again, just personally do not like Politis on counter build, but if you are a Banshee gamer and want to rise up, by all means, try to adapt the stat line that I have here. The attack we are going to have is her base attack with an artifact and an I-90 weapon. The defense is 1350 defense or higher. The health is 15.5k or higher. I have seen Politis have over 16k HP against some of these legend players that just play this like really insanely tanky Politis. And since we're not really going for any damage stats, I decided to go with 230 speed. This is usually what you used to see the speed line for most people be on for Politis. I feel like in my experience 200 has been fine, because whenever you trigger her S2 passive Astral Guide, I feel like you'll almost always take the turn unless they are playing just absolute speed demon characters like Ron and Pavel or Assassin Sid. And in which case, if in most of those scenarios, your Politis is probably dead anyway before she even takes a turn. So yeah, I think that this is the one build that you can get away with being a little bit faster, because we just don't, again, have those critical hit chance or critical hit damage numbers. The effectiveness I have here at 100%, although you can go higher. If your goal is to make sure that you can stun even Soul Weavers, you might want to go as high as 200. Again, it just depends entirely on you. I have found that unless you're really willing to commit a ton to effectiveness, like over 200, 100 is usually fine for almost everything else in the game. It gives you a pretty good chance against everything except cleansers and some specific Soul Weavers. So keep that in mind. Taking a look at the right side, I'm on an HP percentage necklace and an HP percentage ring, although if you are trying to go for that high effectiveness for like an Abyssal Crown build or a Yellow Violin build, then sure, you can jack it up a little bit by going with an effectiveness ring. I'm on speed boots, and the artifact I'm on is Yellow Violin because I found that it is very potent against Maid Chloe, and I was using this build or at least a similar style to this build originally at first. I really like Yellow Violin, and the other reason I am posting it here is because everyone should have access to Yellow Violin, whereas Abyssal Crown is a 5-star artifact that not every player might have access to, so keep that in mind. Although Abyssal, when it happens, is pretty devastating. Honestly, I think that a build like this on Abyssal is really devastating in a lot of matchups if you can, kind of get it to work to your advantage. Looking at the per piece average, you want 12% effectiveness or higher based on your needs, 11 speed, 8% HP, and 11% defense. The last Politis build to talk about is a hybrid between the first and second build. I have seen a lot of players, specifically some streamers, have two Politis built. They have one on damage and one on that, violin / Abyssal Crown utility build, and that works fine for them, but I am not made of money. I do not have two Politis, so the way I've chosen to play her, and it's been working out reasonably well for me so far over the last couple of weeks, is a hybrid build, obviously again on speed immunity. This seeks to have a Politis that can actually dish out some damage while having a decent chunk of bulk, because I was really tired of my Politis dying before she even got to her second turn, so I wanted a little bit more HP and a little bit more bulk than the DPS build at the expense of some of the damage. I felt like the trade-off essentially was worth it to me. Overall, it's largely just a swap from an attack percentage ring in the DPS build to a health build, health ring, but you can do more here. You can beef it up even more if you so choose from the net stat numbers that I am proposing. Taking a look at these proposed stats, we have 3,000 attack instead of a 3,500, 1,200 defense, 12k HP. Again, you can go higher on both the defense and health if you want. You can bring the attack a little bit down, maybe like 2,800. I still want as close to that 100% critical hit chance as possible while still being on immunity build. I currently have 91, but once I reforge my ring, I'll probably have closer to 94, 95. 250 critical hit damage again, and obviously the base effectiveness. If you're wondering why the effectiveness is so low on both of these builds, it's simply because I feel like Politis will be able to land the blind, the unbuffable, and get the strip on most characters in this format with that level of effectiveness, because most things at this point are just damage dealers that don't really play any ER. When we take a look at the right side, I'm on a crit damage necklace, an HP percentage ring, and speed boots. The artifact, again, is Tehegel's Ancient Book for all of my calculations because it's a 4-star, and because, again, I want the ability to counter that Angel of Light Angelica if the opportunity presents itself. Obviously, again, based on preference and your needs, you can play Abyssal Crown, Violin, or even Portrait of the Saviors if for some reason you still wanted to get more damage out of a bulkier Politis. Looking at the per piece average, we want 19% attack because, again, we're on an HP ring here, so we don't have the attack percentage anymore. 14% critical hit chance, and the rest of the stats are going to depend entirely on you. As you can see, we need like 5% HP, 6% defense, and 5 speed, and like 6% crit damage across all the pieces on average. So I leave it to you to choose pieces that are like, okay, this one has like 15 crit damage and like 10 speed, so the next piece doesn't need any crit damage or speed, so I'll just put HP or defense. So it's more of a well-rounded build overall when you look at the per piece average, and it makes sense because, again, this is the hybrid build. We are trying to be kind of decent at everything. We want decent damage but not amazing damage. We want decent bulk but not amazing bulk, and we want to have some skin in the game, I feel like, for every scenario, and that's what this build has been doing for me so far, and I really like this one the most. For teammates, as long as the enemy has a non-attack skill on their team, I think Politis will work pretty much in any team comp, so you don't really need to worry too much. That said, there are a couple characters I feel like that are a cut above. The first of which are the two mitigation sources I usually pair her with, which is Fallen Cecilia and Troublemaker Crozet. Yes, Crimson Armament is the new hotness and is much harder to counter, but I feel like the barrier and damage shares from Fallen Cecilia and Troublemaker Crozet respectively keep your Politis alive much longer, and usually your opponent will be trying to counter her with some kind of blue damage dealer or some kind of fast opener. So I really prefer to have that extra protection at the start that those two characters provide. She's also really good with Summertime Issaria. If your opponent uses a non-attack skill, it will trigger Politis' S2, Tranquility, which will then trigger Summertime Issaria's S2 and put bombs on the enemy team and give your whole team a CR push, and in the case of Politis, a super CR push. So that's really awesome. Additionally, Summertime Assyria is very potent in the current meta against Green Violet because you can put bombs on him even if he dodges, and he can't really dodge the explosion from the bomb, so that is really, really good. I think these two pair incredibly well together, and it is a pretty underrated piece of synergy, so I would keep that in mind. The last character to talk about is Celine. Obviously, Politis does really well against non-attack skill characters, is what she's designed for. Celine is very much the same. And odds are, if you draft Politis, then they will most likely try to ban it if they have 2 or more non-attack skills. If you take both, at least one of them will make it through. And if both of them make it through somehow, it will make things an absolute nightmare for your opponent. For good matchups, the 2 most obvious ones in the current metagame are Amelia and Maid Chloe. Amelia especially. So Amelia is a character that uses a high frequency of non-attack skills, which leads to a ton of damage from Tranquility or a potential ton of stuns from something like Abyssal Crown, or you can just strip the buffs entirely with Ela Violin. So whenever somebody picks Amelia, Politis should be one of the first characters that is at the forefront of your mind. Maid Chloe is a little bit different. It's going to depend on how you build Politis and what artifact you're on. If you're on Ela Violin and they use the re-raise buff, you'll most likely strip it and make it so that the re-raise is just not a factor, or the attack buffs on the characters are just not a factor. And if you're on a damage-based Politis, if the characters are already dead and Maid Chloe attempts to revive them, Tranquility will immediately kill them before they even get a turn. Essentially, she just S3s, revives her whole team, it triggers Tranquility. Tranquility then just kills all the characters that were just revived. So these two, I think, are her best matchups for sure. Obviously, she's still very good against characters like Auxiliary Lots and Flan, because that's the characters that she was designed to counter. But one you're probably not thinking about is Summertime Assyria. Every time they use an AoE skill, it's going to proc Summertime Assyria's S2 passive to put bombs on the enemy team. That's a non-attack skill, which means that Politis will use Tranquility to counter, and it will most likely then be Politis' turn, which allows you to either potentially kill the Summertime Assyria before she has a chance to detonate the bombs that she already placed, or you can at least severely hinder the enemy team, especially if you're on an artifact like Abyssal Crown. For bad matchups, the one you should expect the most often is Blue Kisei. You will be seeing Blue Kisei quite a lot when you pick Politis, because she almost always will go faster than your Politis and kill her outright, which is why in the teammate section I highly recommended Fallen Cecilia and Troublemaker Crozet, so that this will not happen. This character, I think, is probably the one that you should be on the lookout first and foremost, because again, I feel like 95% of the time when you pick Politis, they're jamming Kisei, so keep that in mind. She's also super, super bad into characters that have lots of AoE counterattacks, especially blue ones such as Rem and Seaside Bellona. When you activate Tranquility, there is a good chance that the Seaside Bellona is going to bat back with her S2 passive, and when you use your S3 to blind a character, Rem has a good chance of countering back as well. So not super big fan of these. And then obviously, for flavor win, Politis is not really good against Bellion either, for the same reasons. Bellion is essentially in the current meta another version of Rem, because they're always playing her on counter set and Elbrus Ritual Sword, which means that Politis has very low impact on her S1 and S3s because they will trigger Bellion. On top of that, Bellion forbids Soul Generation, which means that if you're onto Hagel's Ancient Book, any of those cool fancy combos and setups that we were talking about from the earlier part of the video with the book and soul burning and getting out of things like Angel of Light Angelica's silence, those are all gone. It's for that reason you super don't really want to pick Politis into a team comp that has both Angel of Light Angelica and Bellion, so keep that in mind. And that is going to do it for the how to play video on Politis. Hopefully this video was of some help to you. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's a specific character you want to see, also let me know down below as well. If you want to see other Epic 7 how to play videos like this one, there should be a playlist on your screen to my right now, and you can take a look at those wonderful videos that I have already made. As always, have a good day, have a good week, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye now.